All right, so are you ready to dive into these Super Bowl predictions? It's that time of year again, where everyone's glued to the standings. And this season, man, it has been wild.
Yeah, it's been a crazy season for sure.
It really has. I mean, anyone else just totally surprised by how strong the Detroit Lions are looking? Like, can Jared Goff really pull off like a comeback story for the ages?
It's definitely shaken things up a bit.
It really has.
And you've got some really interesting sources here that dive deep into like potential playoff matchups and, all those key factors that'll decide who takes home the Lombardi Trophy this year.
Yeah.
So are you ready to break it all down and see if your predictions hold up?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, great.
Let's start with the AFC contenders, I think.
Sounds good.
The Kansas City Chiefs are, well, they're the Chiefs.
Right.
Can anyone really stop Mahomes at this point?
That's the question, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, your sources seem pretty convinced that he's just going to waltz into another Super Bowl.
Yeah, a lot of them are saying that.
But, some of your sources point out that it's not just Mahomes' magic, you know? It's that synergy between him and Andy Reid.
Right.
They highlight the Chiefs' offensive adaptability. They've got this uncanny ability to, like, shift gears mid-game.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, for instance, in that Week 5 game against the Broncos, they were struggling in the first half, and then, boom, they switched to a no-huddle offense and just ripped through that Broncos defense like it was nothing.
Oh, yeah. That was a statement game for sure.
It really was.
Okay, so they can adapt. But what about the Baltimore Ravens? Lamar Jackson is back, and their defense is like a wall.
Yeah, they're looking really strong this year.
Do your sources see them as the biggest threat to the Chiefs?
Several of them do, and they highlight that revitalized offense.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that game against the Steelers where Jackson threw for over 300 yards and rushed for another 100?
I do.
Talk about a one-man wrecking crew.
Oh, he was on fire that game.
Yeah, and their defense consistently ranks among the top in points allowed and takeaways.
That's right.
So it'll be interesting to see how their, hard-nosed physical style kind of matches up against the Chiefs' explosiveness.
Yeah, that's going to be a great matchup if it happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, this source here is all about the Miami Dolphins. They're claiming that they are the dark horse to watch this year.
Interesting.
Tua and Tyreek Hill's connection is electric, but can they really keep up with the Chiefs and the Ravens?
Well, it all boils down to whether their defense can hold up in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the big question mark.
Right.
Yeah.
Your source argues that their secondary, despite some early season struggles, has started to gel, especially with Xavier Howard, shutting down these top receivers.
Right.
But it's a big question mark whether they can handle, the offensive powerhouses of the AFC.
Yeah, true.
The Chiefs, the Ravens.
For sure.
It's a tough road.
All right, this article here seems pretty concerned about the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, yeah.
Josh Allen's got the talent, but they've been hit with inconsistency and injuries this year. What do your sources say about their playoff chances?
Well, your sources point out that, the Bills' struggles go beyond just the injuries.
Okay.
They haven't been able to establish a consistent running game.
That's true.
Which puts a lot of pressure on Allen.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs, when the game slows down and every possession counts, that could be a major liability.
Yeah, absolutely.
They really need to figure out that running game.
For sure.
If they want to make a deep run.
All right, so we've got a good sense of the AFC landscape now. Let's shift gears and dive into the NFC contenders.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles. Their offense with Jalen Hurts is just lighting up the scoreboard. But is that aggressive style sustainable in the playoffs?
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
One of your sources actually makes a fascinating point about their aggressive style.
Okay.
And argues that it's actually a double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, while it can lead to big plays and really demoralize opponents, it also makes them more prone to turnover.
Right.
Which can be fatal in those high-stakes playoff games.
Yeah, one mistake can really cost you.
Absolutely.
And that same source also questions their defense. Are they really as dominant as their stats suggest?
Yeah, there's some debate about that in your sources.
Okay.
Their defensive line, led by Hassan Reddick, is undeniably fearsome, racking up sacks and pressures.
Right.
But some analysts argue that they haven't been truly tested against, the elite quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the playoffs will definitely reveal if their defense can hold up against the best of the best.
Okay, now on to a team that always seems to be in the mix. The San Francisco 49ers. Christian McCaffrey seems to have revitalized their offense.
He has.
But how will Brock Purdy handle the playoff pressure?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, your sources acknowledge that Purdy has exceeded all expectations so far.
He really has.
But the playoffs are a whole different animal.
Right.
You know, he hasn't faced the kind of intense pressure and, intricate defensive schemes that he'll encounter in the postseason.
Yeah, that's going to be a big test for him.
It will.
And speaking of surprises, can we talk about the Detroit Lions for a second?
Yeah, let's talk about the Lions.
Dan Campbell has turned this team around.
He has.
But is Jared Goff really back to his prime?
Yeah. Several of your sources highlight that it's not just about Goff.
Okay.
Their offensive line has been outstanding this season.
They have.
Giving him time to throw and opening up those holes for the running game.
Yeah.
And their defense, as you pointed out earlier, has been a revelation.
It really has.
Aiden Hutchinson is a game changer on that defensive line.
Yeah, he's been incredible.
Disrupting plays and creating havoc in the backfield.
All right, and lastly, the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, the Cowboys.
Talented roster, no question.
Right.
But can they find that consistency they need to make a deep run?
That's been their Achilles heel for years, hasn't it?
It has.
Your sources point out that they tend to struggle against those top-tier defenses.
Yeah.
And often make those crucial mistakes in key moments.
That's right.
So it'll be interesting to see if Mike McCarthy can finally get them over the hump.
So we've got a good overview of the contenders in both conferences. But what are the deciding factors that will separate the champions from the rest?
Well, your sources delve into a few key areas.
Okay.
Quarterback play obviously is crucial.
Right. And that leads us to our next point.
Well, hold on. Before we jump into quarterback play, I think it's important to address something else your sources highlight.
Okay, what's that?
Special teams.
Oh, good point. Special teams can make or break a playoff run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of your sources even argues that it's the most overlooked aspect of playoff success.
Interesting.
And it emphasizes how crucial it is to have a reliable kicker, a punter who can flip the field,
Right.
and a return game that can, generate big plays or at the very least avoid costly mistakes.
Yeah, you don't want to give up a big return for a touchdown in the playoffs.
Right, exactly.
All right, so special teams got it. Now, let's talk about those quarterbacks.
Okay.
You've got some contrasting styles at the top, like Mahomes' improvisational brilliance versus Jackson's dual-threat explosiveness.
Right.
How do your sources compare them, and who do they think handles pressure best?
One of your sources really dives into the psychological aspect of quarterback play
Okay.
and points out that Mahomes seems to thrive under pressure.
Yeah, he does.
He's got this uncanny ability to stay calm in the pocket
Right.
and make incredible throws even when he's facing a heavy rush.
It's like he doesn't even see the pressure.
Right.
And what about Jackson?
Well, with Jackson, it's all about his athleticism and,
Yeah.
his ability to create something out of nothing.
Yeah.
But that same source questions whether his reliance on improvisation can be as effective in the playoffs, where defenses are more disciplined and, those game plans are more intricate.
All right, so we've got Mahomes' coolness under pressure versus Jackson's game-breaking athleticism.
Well,
What about some of the other top quarterbacks? How do they stack up?
your sources highlight Jalen Hurts' remarkable improvement as a passer this year.
Oh, yeah, he's taken a big step forward.
He has. He's
Yeah.
not just relying on his legs anymore. He's making accurate throws, reading defenses well, and showing a level of maturity that wasn't there before.
So he's become a more complete quarterback.
Exactly.
But can he consistently make those throws when the pressure is on in the playoffs?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
One of your sources raises concerns about his decision-making under duress.
Okay.
He's still prone to forcing throws and making mistakes when that pocket collapses.
All right, so Hurts' development is promising.
Right.
But his decision-making in high-pressure situations is a question mark. What about Josh Allen and the Bills?
Well, Allen's talent is undeniable,
It is.
but his inconsistency is a concern.
Yeah, that's been the issue.
Right. Your sources point out that he can be brilliant one moment and then make kind of baffling decisions the next.
It's true. Yeah.
He's got the arm strength and the toughness to lead a team to a Super Bowl,
He does.
but he needs to find a way to be more consistent, especially in the playoffs.
Okay, so quarterback play is obviously crucial, but defense wins championships, right?
They say that.
Which teams do your sources believe have the defensive firepower to shut down these offensive juggernauts?
Well, your sources highlight a few teams with elite defenses.
Okay, whoa.
The Ravens, as we've discussed, are always a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, their defense is always tough.
It is their defensive scheme, built on aggressive blitzing and tight coverage,
Right.
creates turnovers, and really stifles opposing offenses.
Okay, and what about the 49ers? They've got a reputation for being a defensive powerhouse.
Absolutely.
Right.
Their defense is built on, a strong front seven
Yeah.
that can shut down the run and generate consistent pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah.
Plus, they have a talented secondary that can lock down those opposing receivers.
Right.
They're a complete defensive unit,
They are.
and they're a nightmare to face in the playoffs.
All right, so we've got the Ravens and 49ers as the top defensive contenders. Any other teams that stand out?
Well, your sources are surprisingly bullish on the Detroit Lions defense.
Really?
Yeah, they argue that their defensive line, led by Aiden Hutchinson, is one of the most disruptive units in the league.
So the Lions, with their ferocious defense, could be a dark horse contender.
It's definitely a possibility. They've got the defensive talent to make some noise in the playoffs, but it remains to be seen if their offense can keep pace with the top teams.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's a big F.
All right, so we've covered quarterback play and defense. What about depth? Injuries happen especially in the playoffs.
Right.
Which teams do your sources believe have the depth to overcome adversity?
Your sources point to the Chiefs and the Eagles as teams with impressive depth.
Okay.
The Chiefs have a strong supporting cast around Mahomes,
Yeah.
with reliable backup players at key positions.
Right.
And the Eagles have built a deep roster, especially on the offensive line and in the secondary, which could be crucial if they face any setbacks.
All right, so depth is key, but what about coaching?
Right.
Coach.
Experience matters in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
How do your sources assess the coaching matchups, and do they foresee any strategic surprises?
Well, your sources highlight the experience and playoff success of coaches like Andy Reid,
Right.
John Harbaugh, and Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, they've all been there before.
They have.
Right.
They know how to prepare their teams for the pressure, and they're known for their ability to make adjustments during games.
So we've got experience on one side, and then
And then you've got Dan Campbell, who, despite his lack of playoff experience, has injected a new energy and belief into the Detroit Lions.
right.
Your sources suggest that his unconventional approach and his ability to motivate his players could be a wild card factor in the playoffs.
So Campbell's energy and unconventional tactics could be a game changer for the Lions.
It's definitely a possibility. His style is a departure from the more traditional coaching approaches, and it'll be interesting to see how it translates to the playoff environment.
All right, so we've analyzed the contenders, the deciding factors, and those all-important special teams.
Right.
Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Hold on. Before we start predicting playoff matchups, there's one more key factor we need to address.
Oh, right. I almost forgot about it.
The impact of home field advantage.
Right.
Your sources emphasize how crucial it is to have that home crowd behind you in the playoffs.
Right. The energy of the crowd, the familiarity of the stadium, it can all make a difference. Which teams do your sources believe will have a significant home field advantage?
Well, the Chiefs, playing at Arrowhead Stadium, are notoriously tough to beat at home.
Yeah, Arrowhead is a tough place to play.
The crowd noise is deafening.
It really is.
And it can really disrupt those opposing offenses.
Okay, so Arrowhead is a fortress. What about some of the other contenders?
Well, the Eagles, playing in Philadelphia, also have a raucous home crowd that can be a real factor.
Yeah, they do.
And the 49ers, with their passionate fan base, create a challenging environment for those visiting teams at Levi's Stadium.
Right.
Home field advantage is definitely something to keep in mind as we start mapping out those playoff paths.
Right, you're right. Home field advantage could be a game changer. Now, let's finally dive into those playoff paths. Who do your sources think will make it to the Super Bowl?
Well, in the AFC, the path to the Super Bowl seems destined to run through Kansas City. Your sources are pretty unified on that. But the question is, who emerges from the pack to challenge them?
Yeah, you've got some heavyweight contenders in the mix. The Ravens, the Bills, the Dolphins. They're all capable of making a run.
Exactly. And your sources offer some intriguing insights into potential upsets. One article points out that the Dolphins have a history of playing the Chiefs tough. Remember that Week 9 matchup last season where Tua outdueled Mahomes?
Oh, yeah. That game came down to the wire.
Yeah.
So the Dolphins could be a real threat to the Chiefs, especially if their defense steps up.
Absolutely. And don't count out the Bills. While they've been inconsistent, they have the talent to beat anyone on a given day. One of your sources suggests that if Josh Allen can regain his early season form and limit his turnovers, the Bills could be a dangerous team in the playoffs.
Okay, so the AFC is shaping up to be a battle royale. What about the NFC? It seems a bit more wide open.
It does, doesn't it? Your sources highlight the Eagles, 49ers, and surprisingly the Lions as the top contenders.
The Lions. as a legitimate Super Bowl contender. That's a bold prediction.
It is, but your sources make a compelling case. They point to the Lions' impressive defense, their strong running game, and their newfound confidence under Dan Campbell.
Right, and they've got that underdog mentality. They're playing with nothing to lose, which can be dangerous in the playoffs.
Exactly. And remember, home field advantage could play a significant role in the NFC. If the Eagles can secure the top seed playing in Philadelphia with that passionate crowd behind them, they could be very difficult to beat.
Okay, so we've got the Eagles with their home field advantage, the 49ers with their defensive prowess, and the Lions with their underdog spirit. Who do your sources see as the biggest threat to the Eagles?
Well, several sources point to the 49ers as the team best equipped to dethrone the Eagles. They have the defensive firepower to contain Jalen Hurts and the offensive versatility to exploit any weaknesses in the Eagles' defense.
And what about the Lions? Can they really make a deep run?
One of your sources makes a fascinating comparison between the Lions and the 2017 Eagles, who also came into the playoffs as underdogs but rode a wave of momentum and a strong defense all the way to the Super Bowl.
So the Lions could be this year's Cinderella story.
It's certainly within the realm of possibility. They've defied expectations all season, and they have a coach who inspires belief in his players.
All right, so we've got the Eagles as the favorites, the 49ers as the main challengers, and the Lions as the intriguing dark horse. But let's face it, the playoffs are all about matchups. Which potential matchups do your sources find particularly fascinating?
Well, in the AFC, a Chiefs-Ravens showdown would be a classic clash of styles. You've got Mahomes' aerial attack versus Jackson's ground and pound offense. It would be a battle of two of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the league.
And defensively?
Defensively, it would be strength against strength. The Ravens' aggressive blitzing schemes versus the Chiefs' offensive line, which has been one of the best in the league at protecting Mahomes.
That would be must-see TV. What about in the NFC? Any potential matchups that jump out?
A 49ers-Eagles matchup would be a fascinating chess match. Kyle Shanahan's offensive ingenuity against Jonathan Gannon's defensive schemes.
And what about the Lions? If they make it to the playoffs, who would be their ideal opponent?
One of your sources suggests that the Lions would match up well against a team like the Vikings, who have a strong offense but a questionable defense.
So the Lions could pull off an upset if they face a team with defensive vulnerabilities.
It's definitely possible. Their defensive line could feast on a weaker offensive line, and their running game could control the clock and keep the opposing offense off the field.
All right, so we've explored some tantalizing potential matchups. But now the moment you've been waiting for, let's get to your predictions. Which two teams do you think will make it to the Super Bowl?
Based on the analysis in your sources and the factors we've discussed, I believe the Super Bowl will be a matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Wow, Chiefs versus Eagles. That's going to be a clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
I mean, both teams have just explosive offenses.
Right.
Talented defenses, experienced coaches. It would be like a dream matchup for NFL fans.
Absolutely. And, it would be a fascinating contrast of styles, too.
Oh, yeah? How so?
Well, you've got the Chiefs with their, high-flying, pass-happy offense led by Mahomes.
Right.
And the Eagles with their, more balanced attack featuring Hurts' dual threat ability and that dominant offensive line.
Yeah, and defensively, you've got the Chiefs' opportunistic secondary going up against the Eagles' relentless pass rush.
It would be a battle of strengths versus strengths.
For sure. And let's not forget about the coaching matchup. Andy Reid versus Nick Sirianni. Two offensive masterminds who know how to get the best out of their players. Okay, so we've got the Chiefs and the Eagles as our Super Bowl prediction. But before we crown them champions, let's not forget about those other contenders who could potentially shake things up.
Right. The Ravens, Bills, 49ers, and even the Lions can't be completely ruled out.
Yeah, they can't.
They all have the potential to make a deep run if things fall their way.
Absolutely, and that's what makes the NFL playoffs so unpredictable and exciting. You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Every game is a battle, and one play can change the entire course of a team's season.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Super Bowl predictions, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've analyzed the contenders, the matchups, the key factors. But at the end of the day, the playoffs are about more than just stats and predictions. It's about heart determination and the will to win.
Well said. It's about those moments of brilliance, those clutch plays, those unexpected heroes that emerge when the pressure is on.
Exactly. So as you watch the playoffs unfold, remember that anything is possible. The underdogs can rise up, the favorites can stumble, and the team that plays with the most passion and purpose often comes out on top.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Enjoy the games, and may your predictions come true.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We've had a blast exploring these Super Bowl predictions, and we can't wait to see how the playoffs unfold.
Until next time, keep those helmets shiny and your spirits high.